These people all got rich in the influencer revolution. And in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how they did it, how I built my personal brand, and how you can too. And yes, that's you. My close friend Taylor Swift has built one of the top 20 net worths of self-made women and has one of the single strongest personal brands as a woman in existence today. And here are 5 things that I learned from what she's done in building her brand that I use for me. The first thing that I learned from her, longevity. Do you know how old she was when she made her first song? 16. It was in 2006. Tim McGraw was the first song that she released. These people have actually a very long time under their belts of how many years they put in to their personal brand.
14 years ago, News 4's Terry Bulger met an aspiring country music singer from Hendersonville High School.
And so a lot of times we're measuring a 2-year career against a 20-year career, and everything compounds with time. She gained more popularity in the last 12 months than she probably did in the first 19 years, which sounds crazy, but at the same time is also true. And so that's what Taylor did for longevity. But what did I do? My first podcast was in July of 2017. 6+ years that I've been making content. Now, to be fair, hers was at a larger scale, and as I actually increased my scale, so too did my branding and awareness and reach follow. You gotta do the same thing in a lot of quantity for a very long time before it really starts to get going. Don't compare your first year to someone's 10th year. The longer you do something, the better you get at it. Also, the longer you do something, the more you have done. Because if I post once a week for a year versus once a week for 10 years, it's talking about 520 videos versus 52 videos. So I'm going to have all of the compounding of all those other videos that are gonna be bringing people to my world that whole time, plus 520 reps of being good at that thing. And just to give you some numbers around this, my first year of posting videos on YouTube, I gained a total of 88,000 subscribers. The second year, I gained over 600,000 subscribers. And so far this year, I've done over 1.1 million subscribers. And so the more you do, the better you get. And to give you another extreme example, because I mentioned my podcast earlier, my first 2 years of podcasting, I got to a total of 2,000 downloads a month. And just fast forward to now, 6 years in, I get about 2 million downloads a month. So these things can compound, they just take time. The second thing that I learned is scaling the unscalable. So she has famously been known for appearing randomly at some of her fans' weddings, to play songs for them. Everyone loses their mind, all the iPhones come out, and then she goes viral on the internet for a few days.
A newlywed couple got a surprise wedding crasher that they wouldn't dare to turn away.
I am not a world-class performer, and I'm probably not going to be able to perform at someone's wedding. But how can I take what Taylor did in scaling the unscalable in that micro example and apply it to what I do? Every so often, I'll do a sporadic Q&A live with people in our audience, in Mosey Nation. What do I do for a living? I invest and advise businesses. So what's a micro version of that? I can advise somebody who would never really have access to me in any other capacity. And so I can still take that and then multiply it to thousands of other people because it scales something that otherwise is unscalable. I couldn't talk one-on-one to every single person in my audience. It'd be impossible. She can't show up at every person's wedding. But she can still simulate the experience, and to the same degree, for me, the reason I put out all this free content and I put out all my books and my audiobooks and the courses, and they're all free. And I do that because that's something that allows me to take a lot of energy, put it into one thing, and then distribute it to everyone. The third thing that I love from Taylor, vulnerability. Even in her songs themselves, she showcases her heart and her looking like the fool or the crazy person more times than not. And so what happens is she becomes still, despite being the superstar that she is, relatable at the lowest level to the girl that's still singing in her hairbrush into the mirror, because they experience the same feelings Taylor does. The many flaws and pitfalls and heartbreaks that she's had over her entire career, and just showing them to the public rather than trying to hide them. Taylor then, instead of having something that everyone can attack, flips it into a power, because if you attack her for that, you attack her entire fan base for experiencing the same thing. And so she builds an army of people that will defend her because they resonate with the experience that she shared.
Taylor Swift fans may have taken her hit song Shake It Off too literally.
Yeah, it actually caused the equivalent of a 2.3 magnitude earthquake and it lasted several hours. That's a new record.
Okay, Alex, how are you vulnerable? All the stories I tell, the vast majority of them are me fucking up and losing all my money twice. She talks about relationships and love a lot. And so her equivalent of bankruptcy and losing everything is getting her heart broken. And so for me, I talk about the first time I whiffed on a sale, the first time I trusted a partner and didn't work, the first time I had all my money stolen, the second time I had my money stolen, the multiple businesses that I had to shut down, when I had 9 businesses and had to shut 8 of them down so that I could go all in on one. These are all stories that aren't like the fun cover of Forbes. Instead, they're just like, hey, I also was a small business owner and made a lot of mistakes that you might too. And so for another small business owner who hears that, they might be like, I've been there too. And then it takes something that seems crazy and unattainable, like a multi-$100 million portfolio, and makes it relatable. Thing number 4 from Tay-Tay, I'm just gonna put ownership. So one of the things that Taylor has done differently than many musicians is that she's a shrewd businesswoman. It's also why she's top 20 on Forbes for wealthiest women in general, which she doesn't talk about as much, but girl knows how to make money. Her last Eras tour grossed over $1 billion on one tour. So what she's done is she independently publishes her stuff. And this has been something I think she's worked towards, because in the beginning she sold our music, then she had to buy it back, lots of drama. But she has moved towards this action. And because now she has more money and she has more leverage because she has such a big audience, she can negotiate different deals that other people wouldn't be able to. Now it's like, okay, Alex, well, how do I do something like that? Or how did you do something like that? Right off the bat, I could have gone to a regular publisher to publish all my books. Like that would have been pretty much the normal path for the business influencer who wants to get the New York Times bestseller, whatever. And so for me, I give away chapters left and right. I make it free on my podcast. No publisher's like, wait, I want to buy the rights to your book so that you can only give it away for free. But I want to do that. And so in order to maintain control, I maintained ownership over my stuff, because even in the short term, I could have taken a few $1 million check from a publisher just up front to write the book. But I'd so much rather own it for the rest of my life and be able to give it away as I see fit, because I know, at least for me, conditions change. And me trying to make a decision today for something that I'm gonna have to live with for the rest of my life feels steep, even though it probably hurts more in the short term, which is why so many musicians and creators do sign away all their rights too early, because the people who have been there before have seen 100 other creators go through it and they know what's going to happen. But if you can have the stomach to be patient and actually believe that you're going to go all the way, then it never makes sense to sell. And so the last one that I learned from Taylor was shifting identity. Now, a different way of saying this is that her brand has shifted over time. Yeah, she's gone from a country music player to the girl who chases boys and gets her heart broken, to then just becoming this powerful woman today. And so she's shed her identity multiple times and transformed her brand multiple times into what it is today. And I would say that the Eras Tour, for example, is a great exemplifier of her leaning into this idea that she has had eras in her life. Today, I didn't wear a nose strip. What does that mean? It just means I didn't wear a nose strip today. And that's okay. I don't actually have my hat on today either. Why am I doing that? Does it mean that I'm making some big statement about it? No, I just want to be me. And if I ever feel like I have to dress the part to be on camera, I don't want any part of it. Play it out. If I then become beloved for something that I'm forcing myself into, then what I'm doing is I'm portraying something that's other than myself for people to fall in love with. As I change and grow, I will grow further and further away from the thing that people love, which means that I will have to feel more and more like a fraud. I will have to fake it and pretend more and more as more people fall in love with this idol that I've created that's not even real. And so for me, if I decide to change my shoes one day, I'm gonna change my shoes. I'm not gonna say, well, my whole audience expects me to wear Crocs. I don't wear Crocs, by the way, anymore. I think this is one of the beautiful things that creators have, and that us as individuals have. It's embracing who you are, which I think she's done unbelievably well, and staying true to that North Star rather than what critics want her to be. And she's even changed that way in her music. And she's like, you know what? I'm just gonna be me. That's what her audience is in love with. Her being her, because she gives them permission to be themselves. And if you're curious, You Belong With Me is my favorite Taylor Swift song. This is The Rock. This is a life-size cutout of him. Yes, I am huge, but not as huge as The Rock's net worth, which just crossed multiple billions of dollars based on his stake in Terramana Tequila. Here are 4 things I learned from The Rock. First thing right off the bat is the same thing that I got from Tay-Tay, which is longevity. Do you know how long The Rock has been The Rock? I mean, we even call him The Rock, but he's Dwayne Johnson. And some people don't even know that he got his career started as a WWE wrestler. He started his career in 1996. Some of you guys watching this weren't even a glimmer in your father's eye in 1996. So point number one is longevity. Point number two is work ethic. One of the things that Dwayne Johnson has made himself famous for is how early he shows up to sets, how late he will stay, and how he never misses a workout no matter what.
He flies into China, it's 4 a.m, he's lifting weights. Like, what the fuck?
When he started his career, he started at the bottom of the totem pole in WWE, the guy that everyone beat up. And he had to show up and work twice as hard. The same story as Kobe Bryant, of like, if they work out once, if I work out 3 times, I'll just get better faster. He wasn't born this way. And even 5 years into that career, he wasn't Dwayne Johnson, the multi-billionaire icon. He wasn't even still, can you smell what The Rock is cooking yet? Like,
what The Rock is cooking.
he hadn't really even reached the peak or the zenith of his stardom. It took a long time for him to get there. And he was able to stomach it because of his work ethic. And so how do I apply this to me? I have always taken the position that I work from the moment I wake up until the moment I literally can't work anymore, especially on the come up. And so I'd work from 4 a.m. until 10, and then from 10 a.m. on, I would do my actual work with other people. And so I couldn't get the work I wanted to get done during the day because I had to run the business. And so I would do it before everyone else was up. So you have to work double time. You got to work the job that you have today, but in the mornings or the late evenings, you build for the job you want to have tomorrow. When I say job, I have a job too today. Even though I own the businesses that we're a part of, I still have a job to do. And so that job is doing what you have to do today and building for what you want to have tomorrow. Even in my current season, I spend 6 hours a day, every day, writing so that I can publish books on a regular cadence. And so my last book, $100 Million Leads, I spent 6 hours a day for almost 2 years writing that book. And same thing for offers. And now with XYZ, secret book that's coming out, I'm doing the same thing. The first thing every day, before I came in today here to film this with you, I edited my book for the first 4 hours of the day. So the third thing I learned from The Rock is expanding niches. He became one of the most, if not the most famous WD wrestler of all time. Now he could have stopped there, but he had bigger aspirations. And so over his career, he has continued to widen and broaden what he's associated himself with. Right in the very, very beginning, he was a football player. Then he spun that into the wrestling career. And then he took that to the natural maximum. And then from there, he started making movies. But what did he start with? He started with roles that required him to be in really good shape and show off that he was in it. If you remember his first 2 movies, The Money Returns and then later Scorpion King, where he was actually a main character in that one, he was there pretty much to show off his physique.
No one else in Hollywood is doing that. Not Tom Cruise, not Will Smith.
Now he's in Disney movies. So he's gone from being a really high-level football player to being bottom of the totem pole WWE, to top of WWE, to low in the movie scene, to high in the movie scene as an action career, to the broadest base that you can have. Because when you get into Disney movies, at that point, you're catering to everyone. Following the strategy has made him among, and if not the highest paid actor today. And so for me, you're like, okay, well, how did you expand your niche? Well, I started as just a dude who was in shape. And then people started coming and being like, hey, can you help me get in shape? And I was like, sure, I guess. And then somebody literally handed me money without me asking. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess I could make money doing this. So then I got into the business of helping getting people in shape. And then I was like, maybe I could open a gym. So then I opened a gym. And then I started doing well with the gym. And then people who own gyms were like, hey, can you help me run my gym? And I was like, I guess so. I don't know if this is business. And then again, literally someone handed me $5,000 and said, launch my gym. And I said, I guess so. And then I took that to 5,000 locations. And then from there, it was like, hey, how did you expand this B2B licensing thing? So you went national. Businesses of that size started to approach me. And that has literally been my entire career. Do something really well, people ask me about it, and then I say, okay, well, I'll show you how I did that. And each of these transitions has actually been forced. Every single time, someone literally handed me money and said, can you do it? And I was like, I guess so. And then that's how it started. So on the topic of money, the fourth thing I've learned from The Rock, monetization. So The Rock has spent the first 20 plus years of his career not really monetizing his direct brand. Now he was in movies, he obviously gets paid to do that, he was paid to be in the WWE, but he didn't really own anything that he was able to really push. And then all of a sudden in the last 3 or 4 years, he came out with ZOA, which is the energy drink and supplement line. He came out with Project Rock with Under Armour, which was a collaboration between him and them. And he came out with Terramana, the tequila. And his slice of Terramana, I believe, is 30% stake in the company, which is now valued at over $6 billion. He's been very strategic about the highest leverage ways that he can monetize his brand without diluting who he is. We've all seen those actresses who come out with an alcohol line now and they don't even drink, or they come out with makeup and they actually are known for their natural look. Things that just obviously don't make sense. Now, what do people fall in love with The Rock for? They love the fact that he works super hard, but he also has cheat days on Sunday. He also sips his tequila and was doing that for a very regular basis, and people knew he loved tequila. And so it made sense for him because it wasn't a change. It was just reinforcing more of what he already was. And so if you think about how you want to monetize, you want it to be more of what you already are. And this is where people miss the mark. They're like, what's the thing that I can sell to the most people? Or what's the thing that's got the highest ticket? It has to reinforce the association that people have come to love about you. And so in studying The Rock and studying some of these other influencers, what I'm paying a lot of attention to is how they're choosing to monetize tastefully. How do I monetize tastefully? Well, I own companies. And so when companies consume my stuff and learn and grow and make more money, then they hit me up and say, hey, Alex, can you help me grow and scale my company and invest? And I say, sure, if they're awesome. And if they're not, I just say, just enjoy all the other stuff. I don't need 25 Facebooks. I just need one. And so I'm okay with the fact that 99.9% of people will only, quote, take from me and not give anything back. And I'm cool with that. It's the same reason it would be weird if I came out with a luxury watch line or a suit line of three-piece suits. That would be completely off-brand. Now, do a lot of my people in my audience probably wear suits and do business? Yes. Would that be a high-ticket item that I could probably make a lot of money on? Yes. Does it make sense for my brand? No. And so that's the idea, is that we have these associations that people have come to love you for, and then to go counter that just to make money, everyone sees it, and then they lose trust with you. You can file bankruptcy when you go way too far into debt, and then you can start over. But you can't file bankruptcy on a reputation. Once it's ruined for life. And it takes a very long time to build one and a very short time to lose one. And so if you ever have the choice between reputation and money, always choose reputation, because this one you can't get back. You can always make more money. All right, The Rock, now we're going to Mr. Beast. So first things first that I learned from Mr. Beast was his longevity. And you're gonna hear me keep repeating this. And the reason I say it is because everyone keeps comparing themselves to someone's 10th year. He starting was what, 13?
What's up, guys? Overexcited generic YouTuber here.
He's 11 years in of doing this at an obsessive rate. I feel like there's two stages in most people's career. There's the time they start and the time they get serious. He happened to do both on the same time. And so if you can decrease the time between when you start and when you commit, you'll start seeing the benefits of commitment sooner. Like I see so many people who got into fitness and they say, I've been training for 5 years. And I say, have you been training for 5 years, or have you been going to the gym on and off for 5 years? And they're like, well, I've been training for 6 months. I've been going on and off for 4.5 years. And I'm like, well, then the first 4.5 years was literally just to prepare you for the first 6 months of taking this seriously. You're only 6 months into your working out career, not 5 years. And so they then compare themselves to somebody 5 years and be like, why am I not there? It's like, you're really only 6 months in. Go pro, be a professional, and take it like your job. Number two, and this is a big one. This is super tactical. So I was having a conversation with Mr. Beast, and I was like, we're not trying to make, clickbait videos. We're gonna make stuff that people feel is, really high quality, et cetera. And he looked at me and he just looked at like I had 4 heads, and he was like, you absolutely make clickbait videos. He's like, you just need to make the clickbait true. And it was such a great mindset shift for me, because when I think about marketing, I think about the same way. If you wanna market a product, make the crazy claim, but back up the crazy claim. And some of you guys have been commenting that we've kind of upped our game on our videos, and a lot of it comes from this frame of mind of like, how can you make an insane claim and back it up with an even more insane video? Number 3 is doubling down. The day he started was the day he went pro. He said he was either going to become a pro YouTuber or he wasn't going to do anything at all. And he has shown that with his actions. As he makes more money, he puts all of it back into the next videos. And he has consistently done that since day one. And if anything, his current channel still runs as a quote nonprofit, in that it's not profitable, because he actually chooses to monetize elsewhere through Feastables and Beast Burger and some of his other ventures. He has continued to reinvest in his compounding vehicle, and you'll notice compounding is a common theme among all these people that we're talking about, is that he took the extra, rather than putting in his pocket, he said, what if I put it back on black again? And it is very much a gamble, but if you know what you're doing, you become the house. So for me personally, I have been willing to double down on my career and make big bets that otherwise didn't make sense. My first career as a consultant, most people said, oh, you should go do more of that. But I took all my learnings from being a consultant and then started a gym, which was a big bet for me, but I was doubling down on what I believed to be true. Then I scaled my gyms to 6 locations, and then I just basically walked away from them. I fire sold them in 90 days and then started the licensing business. And from there, doubled down there until now, we now have acquisition.com, our portfolio of companies. Even when I was thinking about selling Gym Launch, so many people were like, dude, you have this amazing business that you don't have to do anything for, that prints you out millions of dollars a month in personal income. What is wrong with you? Why would you sell? Because the thing is that they will project their goals onto your reality. And as long as your reality is above their goals, they will not understand you. And so if you have big goals, then you only have to listen to you, because whatever yours is, if you satisfy their check mark, it's like I satisfied you, not me. And so being willing to double down and burn the boats and pursue the dream that you actually want is risky, but in my opinion, when I die and I look back, well, when I die, I won't be able to look back, but right before I die and I look back, I'll be so much more proud of the failures that I risked than the successes that I didn't. And the fourth thing that I learned from Mr. Beast was packaging, specifically around media. I watched him take apart someone else's video, and in the first 5 seconds he said, stop the video. And this is somebody who had already had 10 million views on the video and was upset that they didn't have 30 million views. And he said, oh, you didn't match the thumbnail to the first 5 seconds. You didn't confirm it. And he was like, well, that's it. He's like, I don't need to watch any more of the video. That's why it's not a 30 million view video. And it was such a tiny tactical detail, but it made such a massive difference in the amount of views. I now appreciate how important how you package the content you have. So for example, some of you guys have noticed that we run split tests on the thumbnails. And the reason for that is that there's two things we look at. One is how many people click, but then how long people who click based on that watch. And you'd be amazed that there's sometimes 20, 30% increases in the amount of time that someone will watch simply based on how the video was framed. And so for us, we want to make real business education accessible for everyone. And making it accessible for everyone means that we have to package it in a way that makes it attractive to everyone and fulfills the promises that we made in the packaging. I made a video a long time ago about luxury goods. Now, the whole video is just about understanding how luxury goods fits within a pricing matrix in a marketplace. Sounds kind of boring, but I was like, how can I package this in a way that would make it more accessible for more people? And recently, Bernard Arnault, who owns LVMH, which is a holding company that owns many, many luxury brands that you've heard of, flash them on the screen. He had just recently become the richest man. And so I was like, oh, this is relevant. How did he become the richest man? Through luxury goods. And just doing that dramatically improved how many people would benefit from the video, because it became timely, it became trending, and he was around someone who already had demonstrated that it was a viable business model. And the last one I want to hit on from Jim is resourcefulness. Now, a lot of people see him today as the person who spends $1 million on every video and he's giving all this money away, and they're like, I could never copy Jimmy. And you're right, you can't today. But what you can copy is the things that he did to get here. And so his first ever viral video was him counting up as high as he could, and I think he got to 100,000 plus. Now, how much did that cost? Nothing, just imagination. And as soon as he made $10,000 from that video, he gave it to a homeless guy.
This is not clickbait. I'm going to give a random homeless guy $10,000 today.
And then that video went viral. He's consistently just said, how can I use what I have? Which, if you follow any of my content, the first rule of entrepreneurship is use what you've got. And he has exemplified that in his content. And so how do you relate this to me? Well, when I started, I didn't have the big media team that I have today. It was just me and a webcam. And then from there, we're like, okay, let's get one with just like some lights and a professional camera. And then it was like, okay, I'm actually gonna have a videographer here present with me when I do these videos. And then it was like, you know what? We might actually edit the videos rather than just trimming out the front and the end and the ums. It didn't make sense for me at the beginning to have a massive media team because I didn't know what I was doing. And so as we've gotten better, we've gotten better. And we've used the resources we have to continue to grow the team so we can make more stuff for you guys. I would recommend not beating yourself up for the fact that you don't have resources, but learning the skill of resourcefulness, which you will need throughout the entirety of your career, because at every level, you have to always be resourceful. And if you don't learn how to be resourceful when you have nothing, you're not gonna be resourceful when you have everything. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that and the chocolate bars. Check out Feastables, by the way. Right off the bat, what did I learn from Joe? Longevity. You're like, wow, Alex, why do you keep saying that? Because it fucking matters. All right, I keep repeating it because not one of these people is an overnight success. All of these are decade-plus successes, and most of them are multi-decade successes. Joe started doing stand-up comedy in Boston in 1988, and for many of my audience, you also weren't alive then. On top of that, He got his first real break when he started doing Fear Factor, which is a show where he's basically emceeing girls getting rats thrown into a tub with them where they have to keep their mouth open. Joe's had the humility throughout his entire career to be willing to do whatever it took. And I don't think when he was a little kid and was like, I want to be a star, he was like, I'm going to go MC girls in bikinis having bees all around them dripping with honey. I don't think he thought that, but he was willing to take the opportunities that presented itself. And he's been willing to stick with it for a very, very long time. Second thing I've learned from Joe, you know what? I think this is important enough that I'm going to put it on here, because he has restarted his career at zero multiple times. Like, he was a stand-up comedian, but then he's doing emceeing for a TV show. He probably wasn't as good as he is now when he does it for the UFC, one of the biggest sports in the world. He was willing to be humble and do it and suck. And that's why so many losers lose, is because they're not willing to lose. They cannot accept sucking. And so they always lose by default because they never start. Yeah, until you win, no one pays attention to you. Get used to it. And the reason all these people look like overnight successes is because you just happen to find out about them when they hit it. And so you just mark the fact that when you find out about them is when they started doing it, which is ridiculous, but it's a cognitive bias. Just because you experience the world that way doesn't mean it's true. So for me, I have basically restarted my career multiple times. Probably the biggest slice of humble pie that I've had to eat was going from being a white-collar consultant on my way to Harvard to being a personal trainer at a local gym. So not even an owner or a manager, a frontline trainer getting paid minimum wage. And so when you go from a six-figure job to a minimum wage job, your status changes a lot. And that was tough for me. But I knew how miserable I was doing the thing that I didn't like. And I believed that this wasn't what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. And I knew that for me, this was a season of learning, not earning. And so I never thought I was gonna be stuck at minimum wage. I just knew that I felt like I was just getting paid to learn. So I was like, I would pay to be here. So the fact that they're paying me is just a great deal for me. Because the thing is you compare yourself today at day zero, whereas when I left, I was probably at year 6 in terms of like all the things I did to get there. I had to prep for SATs to get into Vanderbilt, to graduate in 3 years, to be president and vice president of the powerlifting, president of the fraternity, and then do all the case study stuff so I could get the consulting job, and did that for 2 years, and then prep for the GMATs. Like, I was 6 years into that career. But I started over at zero because I just wanted something else. And all of you guys who are watching this right now, you're watching this personal brand being built and all this content that I'm putting out. I just learned this stuff like 2 or 3 years ago. Right now, I started making my podcast 6 years ago, but for 3 years, I didn't do anything else besides my podcast. But I didn't really go pro on making content until the end of 2019, 2020. I didn't know anything. And so I hired people and was like, hey, can you tell me? And they're like, you suck. And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of that. And I told the first guy that I hired for YouTube, I said, I'm willing to do this for 10 years. And I was like, if it doesn't work after 10 years, I was like, I'll stop. And when we obviously took it in-house, he said on the way out, he was like, I just want you to know that you changed my entire perspective, because I've never had a single person tell me that they were willing to wait a decade for something to work. He's like, every other person who comes to me is like, how do I get 100K subscribers in 90 days? And it's unsurprising now that we actually probably have a bigger subscriber base than anybody he'd ever worked with, because we approached it differently. I'm just willing to suck because I believe that if someone else can get good at it, so can I. Number 3, this is probably the most important one. You are the niche. I want to be really clear. There's a difference between having a personal brand and building a brand in a business. Building a brand in a business is going to be around the products you sell and the avatar, or the audience that you market to. So if you want to build content for a specific business that sells widgets, then it should be probably people using that widget within the context they would use it in. But you building a personal brand should be true to the person, just like you're being true to the product, and encompass all the things that you really are. What is Joe Rogan's niche? Is it politics? But then he does all this biohacking stuff. Oh, well, okay, was it fitness? Well, then he talks about aliens, like a lot. Okay, well, is it fighting? Because he's really deep into fighting. But he's also a big-time stand-up comedian. Well, shoot, what is it? It's none of them, and it's all of them. It's Joe Rogan. Because if I said all of those things together, hey, what big celebrity do you know who's into biohacking, aliens, politics, technology, fighting, and comedy? You'd be like, Joe Rogan. Because that's his unique thumbprint. Now, all of those are different categories and in different proportions. So for example, he's got health and he's got comedy. Well, on his show, which of them takes up a greater percentage? Well, he probably talks more about biohacking and health and things that are going on in the total US around health compared to comedy. Now, he still has comedians on his show and talks about comedy stuff. but the proportion's different. So not only is it the number of categories, but it's the proportion between the categories that makes the unique thumbprint of the creator. Point being, if you're building a personal brand, speak to things that you know. And if you're like, well, I don't know very much, you start with the one you know, because you've lived your life up to this point and you've spent time one way or another, which means that there are things that are unique to you that you are deeper on than somebody on the street. And one of the hardest parts about this, and this is me just being real with you, is that if you know it really well, you actually assume everyone does. If you were raised around cars, for example, and your dad was a mechanic, or you just like love that stuff, you probably know a lot more about cars than the average person. I don't know anything about cars. I'm not really that interested in it. But there are people who are. And so you making content about the things that you actually care about, you will be knowledgeable. And there's a difference between telling people what they should do and sharing the things that you know. It's subtle, but one is preaching, one is teaching. And you want to be the teacher, not the preacher. I think one of the things that he has given me permission to do is talk about all the things that I'm interested in. Because I spoke to many people and they're like, dude, don't talk about your like death philosophy stuff. It's like really dark. And they're like, just talk about money stuff. But if you're gonna be talking money stuff, you should wear a suit because you wanna look that part. But I don't dress that way. I dress like this, but you're gonna look like a meathead. So then, which of these things is Alex Hormozi? All of them, none of them at the same time. Your brand will be stronger based on how closely it matches who you really are and the things that you genuinely care about. And as those things change, so too should your brand to reflect that. Rather than say, oh, I had a mustache for 5 years, which by the way I did. I had a big gunslinger mustache for 5 years, and everything that was public had a gunslinger mustache. And then I was like, you know what? Kind of want to do a beard. So I put a beard on. And so what happened to my brand? It changed. But that was okay because that's who I was then and this is who I am now. And maybe in the future, I'll shave one day. And you know what? I'll still be me. And so if you want to measure the strength of a single person in your audience, in relation to your brand, it's how many interests that you have that a person in your audience shares or overlaps with. If I like politics and fighting and comedy and health and aliens, I'm probably going to love Joe Rogan. On the flip side, if I don't like any of those things, but I kind of like health, then I might kind of like Joe Rogan because I don't like the majority of the other stuff he talks about. And so taking this into my personal context, if someone likes training calves, they like desserts, they like being in shape, they like business and making money, they like philosophy, they're probably gonna like my stuff. And some of the business people are like, dude, I wish you could just only make business content. I was like, but that's not me, because I don't only talk about business. But the point is that like, I don't wanna shy away from who I am so that I can meet some artificially generated algorithm character that doesn't really exist. And I think that in the short term, if I did that, I probably would win in the short term. But in the long term, I would resent who that character become because they had become so far away from who I really am. And then I would feel like a fraud, and then you would see it in my content because I wouldn't feel legit. Number 4 is that Joe only talks about sponsorships he believes in. Now, he obviously has equity in some of the companies that he promotes. So he had a big exit with Onnit, which is a multi-$100 million supplement brand that he basically pioneered, and Alpha Brain, the product that he talked about a lot.
When we came up with Alpha Brain, it was the first one that I ever tried that it was like, this is like a very clear difference.
But he's in a position where he could get, oh my God, if FTX wanted him to promote their product, because I'm sure they did, he could have made a massive check from them for promoting it. But he didn't believe in it, so he said no. And so a lot of what he's defined himself by is all the things that he only truly wants to win. So he only promotes stuff that he actually wants to win and he believes in. And you can hear it in the endorsements that he gives. He's like, I use this stuff, and so I'm letting you know about it.
I take a giant athletic greens every day.
And he doesn't come across salesy, he just lets you know why he takes it. And so, in my opinion, the thing that I've learned from Joe is that you want to promote things that are minimal changes in your behavior. So ideally, you exist exactly the way you were before, except you just happen to get paid for something that you would already be willing to tell someone about. Now that massively limits the amount of things that you can promote. But that's okay, because you don't want to be these people who just shill 100 things. Because by doing that, you also dilute the brand that you have, because everyone knows it's not you, because no one's interested in 100 things. You might only be interested in 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 things. And that's probably what you should limit your quote brand bullets 2. And the 5th one is no hacks, all right? This is so big because you can think about Joe as almost the anti-algorithm. It just says episode whatever and the name of the guest. And he doesn't cut all the stuff so he can make it the most action-packed scene. He just lets it cut unedited, raw, and uploads it. His Instagram, he says he subscribes to post and ghost, which is he posts it and then he ghosts it. They're not optimized. He just uses the platform as somebody who uses the platform. And people choose to follow him because they are interested in what he is interested in. So he is interesting because he is interested. If you look at every one of these celebrities, if you look at their social media, it doesn't look like they're influencers, but they have more followers than almost all the influencers put together that are what I would consider the hacky influencers. Always trying to like algorithm hop or trend hop. You don't see Rogan hopping on the Taylor Swift trend for his Instagram. He just is Joe. I get approached by so many people who DM me saying, hey man, I don't think your LinkedIn is optimized. Hey, I don't think your Instagram is optimized for growth. Hey, I can do a shout out for shout out. Let's do a giveaway to do 20,000 followers, 50,000 followers, whatever it is. None of those build brand. They are simply trying to exploit an artificial hole or inefficiency in how an algorithm works. And if you base your brand on algorithm exploitation, you're basing it on a flaw in a system that will get fixed. And so what you want to do, in my opinion, is that you want to align what you make with what the platform wants, rather than what the platform doesn't want and you hacking around it. What the platform wants is for you to make engaging content that an audience finds interesting, so they stay on the platform. That's it. And so the best way to make interesting content is to talk about the things you are interested in. If you post things that are real for you, you will be real for your audience, rather than just something that's surfed on their newsfeed that they can immediately go to your feed and see that all you do is trend hop, which means that you actually don't exist at all. Kylie was actually the last chink in the armor for me deciding to start making content. And the reason for that was she got the cover of Forbes as a quote billionaire at age 20. And I saw that, and at the time I thought I was hot shit for being a multimillionaire. And when I saw her do that, I have a fundamental belief about business that if someone makes more money than me, they are better at the game of business in some way than I am, and that I can learn from them. And the big difference between what Kylie was doing and what I was doing was her brand. And she had built that through content. The first lesson that I'll say that I have learned from Kylie was, yet again, longevity. Because yes, she has a $1 billion brand and she's very young, but guess how young she started being on national television? She appeared on national television for the first time 20 years ago on Keeping Up with the Kardashians as a little bitty itty bitty girl. She's been in the game 2 decades. And so as much as she is young, she still has put time under the bar. And if you see a common theme for all these people, even the youngest people here have at least a decade and often multiple decades under their belts. So staying with it for a long term, yet again, rules the day. Number 2 is that she showed me leverage. Now, leverage in multiple ways. Number 1 is that she has leverage from her family. She hangs out with other people who are famous. One of the easiest ways to get more exposure is to hang out with people who already have exposure. And she did that early on and has done that through her career. Number 1. Number 2 is that she uses media. She records something one time and millions of people can see it. And so by using that, she gets more for what she puts in. And so that's being able to accelerate her career. Number 3 is that based on the actual products that she has chosen to sell with her brand, she does things that scale. And so imagine if she was selling a tax service. It'd be very difficult for her to scale that to her audience. But if she sells a lip kit, she can make a gazillion of those. And the only real constraint on that would be capital, and she's got that. And so she was able to get a high leverage brand with a huge audience that she built with a long time and media and funnel it into something that has a lot of leverage that she built one time and then could print over and over and over again to her entire audience. Just simply the business she chose to select was one that better suited a mass market B2C brand. A lot of creators make the wrong mistake here. I see guys starting a restaurant when they have a national brand, not to say that you won't make money, it's just that you won't make as much money as you otherwise could in a better vehicle. Number 3 is that she outsources her weaknesses. So the things that she is in charge of is the product and the marketing. So she cares a lot about the lip kits and she cares a lot about the messaging and how things appear and how she disseminates and promotes it. But everything else that she's not an expert at, she's probably not an expert at third-party logistics. She's probably not an expert at actually manufacturing stuff. She's probably not an expert at running warehouses. She's probably not an expert at even building websites. But based on the brand that she has and the success of the company she has, we could probably make a leap of faith to say that she's pretty good at product. And she's also pretty good at promoting. And so by doing the things that she's good at, she's been willing to give up some of the pie to other people who have that expertise so she can leverage the fact that somebody else has 20 years in third-party logistics, partners with them. And to be fair, this is something you see across the Kardashians, they do very well, is that they don't try and own the entirety of the pie. They say, how can we all win here? And I'll take this from the late Charlie Munger. I don't need every last dollar, because he believed that it's either a good deal or it isn't. And if it's a great deal, I'm gonna make a ton of money. And if it's not, he doesn't need to chisel away percentage points. And I think I've seen that across all of the Kardashians and how they structure their deals. They're willing to let other people in to leverage 20 years of experience to not have to start over at ground zero. They start at year 20 on someone else's career because of all the learnings and connections that person has, so that they can just jump that much further forward. Because I don't know about you, but I'd rather own 20% of a $20 billion company than 100% of $1 million company. And number 4 is that she embraces controversy. They have time and again leaned into what other people deem as controversial and ridden the wave of attention that it brings with it. Kylie and her entire family has been willing to do that. Now, that being said, I wouldn't say that I've completely embraced this one entirely, because I don't really talk about much controversial stuff. Besides, poor people should stop doing poor people stuff. They should start following what rich people do and do more rich people stuff. But besides that, not a lot of controversy. And so maybe I need to do better there. But these are the things that I think have helped build and propel her brand at a faster rate than other people. The next one is that she's adaptable, but she's been able to adapt as media platforms have changed. And so it was television once, and then they went from television to Hulu, which is online TV. They went all in on Instagram really, really early and started making content there on a regular basis. And their content looks very different from the classic influencers. Their content feeds into their brand as super famous people, and they continue to reinforce that with the luxury brands they've all done deals with and the products they promote themselves. And the next one is that she is accessible, and this may be even her superpower, and this is partially because she's in the makeup industry. She leaned into just being who she was. And so she would do Instagram lives and stories where it was just her, no makeup. Despite what the media may portray them as making false and unrealistic expectations for girls, I think that what they actually make in their content is probably the exact opposite of that. They show the 16 hours that it took them to get ready for the Met Gala, and all of these things that they do where they have to paint the stuff onto them, or they have to not be able to go to the bathroom for 3 hours because of the stuff that they're wearing. They show that stuff so that they become more accessible, so that people who relate to that also want to buy their products. And so you might see all of these things and be like, how did you use this, Alex? Well, one, I started posting content in general because I saw how much she had made, and I was like, I am missing this whole concept of brand, and I started leaning into it. Number 2 is that I would say that leverage literally is part of our logo, and it's one of the things that I talk about all the time. It's something that I believe a lot in. Outsourcing weaknesses, that's why you hire great people. Every single time I built one of these channels out, I don't try and learn a new platform. I find somebody who already knows it, and I pay them to teach me so that I can learn faster. I'm not good at embracing controversy, but in terms of adaptability and accessibility, we have continued to go into new platforms as fast as we can and as fast as they come out, so that we can experiment, and we're willing to have stuff that absolutely flops. And I think that's cool because we learn. And finally, the accessibility piece is, even though in the beginning it was a webcam and it was just me in a closet making videos, I'd rather start with what I have than try and portray the life that I have, because I went from being really rich and anonymous, saying, you know what, maybe I'll make some videos, to making lots of stuff and making it look really polished and highly produced. But it didn't happen overnight, and I think that Mosey Nation has appreciated just watching the journey the whole way through, just as they've probably appreciated watching her journey, even though they know that she could put filters on or could only hop on Instagram Live once she's done all of her makeup. Like, I could probably flex more of my material belongings than I do, because I just don't think that would serve anyone. And so that's why I don't. So I've learned that from them. Now, obviously, she flexes a little bit on her material belongings, but, you know, tomato, tomato, everyone's got different brands. I'm not gonna come out with a lip kit anytime soon, so that's her brand, not mine. So my brand has evolved over the ages. You can call this Mosey through time. And this is me. I was 23 years old, really into fitness, and just starting my first gym. Here, I'm much older as somebody who's the master gym licensor. You know, I have 5,000 plus locations. I'm building Gym Launch, which is a company that's B2B servicing gym owners. And then over here, you've got Mosey Today, who is the managing partner of a private equity firm called acquisition.com that owns a bunch of companies. And so the question is, how does a brand, as a personal brand, evolve over time? In the beginning, look how I dressed. I've got my neon tank top and I've got my neon shorts. And the reason that I dress this way is because, one, this is how I actually dress because I was into fitness, but also I had a 70% female audience. I needed to look approachable, not like a big scary dude. Me today, probably not something that most women are gonna be like, yes, I'm gonna trust him in my weight loss journey. They're like, I don't wanna look like you and you have a beard. No, thank you, right? But this looks like a relatively approachable young man who's high energy and filled with the light of hope. All I was focused on was fitness, nutrition, and accountability. I was listening to Rihanna on Tuesdays that I was cranking inside of the gym, and I had women's only playlists, and I was catering to the audience that I had at that time. And me, in reality, was this person. All I was thinking about was fitness anyways, and really just trying to get my career going as an entrepreneur. Now, fast forward here when I'm the master licensor. If I was this guy, the audience that I have here is 90% male. And not only 90% male, 90% jacked male gym owners. So look how my personal brand changed. Now, I want to be clear, it's not like every time I did this, it was the most deliberate thing. It was just that I also changed over time. Because what happened is here, all I was thinking about was fitness. I had just been competing, I had a few state records, I was following periodization, I was counting my macros every day. It was what I was obsessed with at the time, which is why I started a business around fitness. But that second part, a business around fitness, started to become the most important part to me, which is why over time, I started caring more and more about business and less about fitness. And so then, I became the Gym Lord, which was the name of our community, which is Gym Lords. And so I started wearing the stuff that repped my new company. And most of the people that followed my stuff then, believe it or not, I was a lot cruder about making money back then than I am now. Because remember, this was the guy who wanted to be rich and anonymous. You will probably grow and change in your interests, and the way you dress and the way you look also changed that way. Now, I think there's a bi-directional relationship. I changed, and so did my audience, which also changed me back. My pants are falling down. I have to blur that out. So I'll call out two things that were very specific about this. Number one was that I called it originally Gym Rescue. And as soon as I got on the phone with people were like, I don't be rescued. I don't need to be rescued. And then their egos would flare up. So I was like, oh no, what if we just launch your gym like we're doing a grand opening? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. Even though they've been open for 5 years. But when I called it a launch, everyone was fine with it. So then I switched my language from Gym Rescue to Gym Launch because of my audience, not because of what I wanted. Kind of interesting. The second thing is you'll notice that I went from bright-eyed and bushy-tailed kid here to man with a handlebar mustache. And so then the mustache became part of the brand, and I did that for the entire time that I was the Gym Lord and running Gym Launch. So then what happened is, as I started making more and more money, I started seeing people making even more money than me. And it was all these private equity guys. And I was like, this guy bought a company for 50 million, sold it for 250, made 200 million, didn't even have to start the company. And so as my interest started to evolve, because I started investing more and I started buying real estate, I started buying businesses, and I was like, there's a game beyond the game. And I actually started moving away from being the Gym Lord because I didn't want to be the face of that company anymore. I just wanted to be the owner. And so this shift was me going from operator to owner. And as an owner, all I cared about was my return on investment and making sure that we were doing business in alignment with our values. And so I started dressing how I would dress without being public facing. Now, the irony of this whole thing is that in dressing in a way that wasn't supposed to be public facing, I ended up becoming even more public facing than I ever thought. And so over time, the way that I dress, which is pretty much just the most utilitarian way I can imagine, look at these calves. And so this is Mosey today. And there may be a Mosey in the future who dresses differently because I changed my mind about stuff. But the thing is that over the years, I went from loving fitness to loving operating businesses to loving owning and scaling companies. And my progression as an individual has reflected in how I dressed and who I was talking to. But the point is that I think the only way to make a personal brand last is for it to be you. And I want to be really clear here. This is a visual prop set. And I'm using this because People need visuals to understand stuff. But I will say that I feel like this overemphasizes the importance of a quote outfit. It is not that important. If I start wearing black tank tops tomorrow and I start wearing sweats, no one's gonna give a shit. Because my value is about the stuff that I provide that helps the audience do better, helps hopefully you guys make more money, grow in the ways that you wanna grow, achieve the goals you want. That's the value, not how I dress. It's just that because I dress this way and I do it consistently, because that's who I am, people have then associated that value with this outfit, which is why someone else can wear my logo and people will approach them and associate the value that I've given them with that person. And that's how you brand. That's how you build brand equity. And so I show this as a visual demonstration to give you the idea, but not to emphasize that you have to wear a certain thing in order to build your brand. But if what you wear is a representation of who you are, then it will probably have some degree to that, because people, at least at the onset, will judge you by how you look. And just to give you guys some context on why a private equity investor would even be making a YouTube video and B, explaining this topic. So number one is that notice how all these people are all billionaires. Kind of interesting. Why are they billionaires? What's different now versus what it was before? Well, now there's direct distribution. When Tom Hanks became famous, he didn't have direct distribution, so he always had to do partnerships with movie companies who then did partnerships with movie theaters to distribute the content. But now, because platforms came in between the distribution and the end user, creators could immediately post directly and interact with their entire audience. And so what that did is it cut out all these middlemen and allowed creators to take up a huge slice of the economics. And so me recognizing that in each of these people is part of the reason that I started, even though I didn't need to, start making content, because I saw the value in the audience. And just to give you guys some hard stats around this on why I decided to basically give up anonymity, which I do like my privacy. One is that this is according to Goldman Sachs. The creator economy is projected to be at 500 billion, half a trillion a year plus by 2027. This is not far away. This is 1 billion, 500 times in a row every year. That's a lot of billions. And to give you an idea of the audience size, Instagram has 2.3 billion, and then YouTube has 2.6 billion users. And TikTok has 1.6 billion. These are all monthly active users. I mean, this is the world. And then beyond that, just to give you context in terms of just USA, YouTube alone creates $25 billion a year in GDP for the United States of America, just from jobs that were created by creators, which right now is over 400,000 jobs. This is real economics that are happening and unfolding in front of our eyes. How business was traditionally done has been turned on its head. And when you see teenagers and 20-year-olds becoming decamillionaires, centimillionaires, and billionaires, pay attention. Because the troll comments in this world are like, if you have so much money, why are you making these videos? Dumbass. If I have so much money, why the fuck do you think I'm making the videos? Because there's value in doing it. Beyond all of the obvious ones, which is you build an audience, you can sell things to them, the larger one that's unspoken is the access to other people. Now, if I want to reach out to a public CEO and say, hey, can I hop on the phone? Or hey, do you want to do a podcast? The answer is yes, because I have an audience. And so whatever their message is, it doesn't matter how rich you are, if you don't have someone listening, you can't distribute your message. So you might be sitting at home or at the gas station or between things, or you're on the can right now, thanks for joining me, and wondering, okay, I just saw some of the biggest influencers of all time and how they built their brands. What am I gonna do now? So what we're gonna use is a process, RIP Charlie Munger, called inverted thinking. So rather than say, hey, here's the 6 steps to creating your personal brand, I wanna talk about the things that would destroy a personal brand or guarantee that you never build one to begin with. So let's start off the top. If I were to only do this one thing, what would I do to guarantee that I can't build a brand? Well, number one is I would talk about something that I know nothing about. So if you talk about stuff that you don't know anything about and are not interested in, I can guarantee you will not build a very good brand around that topic. Next, I would be inconsistent and ideally not even start for fear of judgment. So let's call that quitting / start stop. You can't stick with it, because even if your stuff was really, really good, if you quit for a long time, or you start and you stop and you start and you stop, I can guarantee you, you're not gonna build a big brand. Next thing I would do is I would try and do 2 things around selling. One is I would sell early. So that means that I haven't provided any value to my audience and I immediately start trying to sell them stuff. I have very little goodwill, I don't have a lot of people, but because I'm desperate for money, I start trying to sell stuff and I sell it really hard. Well, that'll probably destroy the brand because people already have very little affinity towards you and now they have zero. So that would be one of the things I would definitely do to make sure that we destroy your brand. The other thing is I would sell wrong. And what I mean by that is that I'd sell the wrong stuff. And so if I'm making stuff about gardening, but then I say, hey, you should take this credit card that has all these great reward points, it doesn't really match. Now, if I was a financial or investing influencer, that might make sense. But if I'm a gardening influencer, just because they're the only person who reached out and said, hey, we'll give you $500 to do the sponsorship, some money is not worth taking. But if we were to do that, we would definitely decrease our audience and decrease the likelihood that they want to tune into our stuff in the future. So the next thing I do is I would associate with the wrong crowd, the wrong people that their core values and the things that they're interested in directly conflict. I'll give you a couple examples for me. One is like a snake oil salesman. So if somebody has a really crappy product or they make these false promises or false claims, then me making an association with them would hurt my brand. And so the idea is, if we wanted to make sure we'd hurt your brand, we'd make sure to associate with the wrong people. Next is I would need perfect conditions. Don't start today, start when you have perfect conditions. Because the thing is that there are no perfect conditions. And so you're like, well, I will only succeed if I have a really big set and lots of people helping me and a script and a teleprompter and all these special effects. If you need that to win, you're not gonna win. Because what I can tell you about every person that we talked about earlier, all of them started with what they had. And so if you really think you're gonna go all the way, then be willing to work with what you have. And the last one is I would never, ever change. Because even if things did start working, if we guaranteed that we didn't change, then we can guarantee that eventually the conditions will change and we will fail. Because you're like, but this thing started working. I have to keep doing that. And then you slowly see it stop working less and less and less and less, and you don't change with it. And at the same degree, you change. If your brand never changes at all, you have changed, and it means that there's actually greater and greater distance between who you are and who you represent yourself to be. And that long-term will sink you. And so if everything I just covered, if you do these things, you can guarantee that your brand will not win and will not succeed in the long term. And so if we're being enterprising about this, what if we flip it? Because that might just be the recipe to succeeding in the long term, which means we talk about the stuff that we know and that we're interested in. We stay consistent with it and we just start and we keep going. You wait way too long to sell it all if you are going to sell to begin with, because you want to make sure that you always provide so much more value than you ever ask from your audience. And then if you do choose to sell something, you sell something that actually requires you to change nothing about who you are. If I already love this type of tank top and people know that I've been wearing it for a few years, then it would make sense for me to say, by the way, this is the brand I use. No one's going to be upset by that because it makes sense based on everything they've seen up to this point. And I would associate with people who are like me, who have audiences like mine, who care about the things like I do, so that those audiences combine and compound unto each other, rather than diluting all of the associations I spent so much time curating and putting together to say, this is what I stand for. And we would wait for imperfect conditions, which often means today, because there are no perfect conditions. And finally, being willing to embrace change, because change is the only constant that will happen in branding at all, is that the platforms will change, the media will change, the packaging will change, and you yourself will change over this whole time. And you have to be willing to do that, or eventually you will die. And so these are the steps, if reversed, that can create a brand, in my opinion, might be able to follow to get rich in today's influencer revolution.